You know, it's difficult to tell you when it all started, but I can tell you that the animal rights movement had its first high-profile introduction to the restaurant industry through People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA. And what PETA started to do was to put pressure on companies to change their sourcing. Restaurateurs should not buy animal protein from certain suppliers that PETA had designated as treating animals improperly or inhumanely. And PETA has been followed on by the Humane Society of the United States, who basically PETA dressed up in a suit. What you need to understand is that these groups are not about animal welfare. They are about animal rights. And their position is, if an animal could talk and it would refuse to be eaten, then you should not be able to eat it. They're basically a vegetarian group that is trying to promote their agenda under the umbrella of animal welfare. But they're really about driving up the cost of production and getting people to feel less comfortable about eating animal protein. You know, there's a middle ground in this area, and that is operators as well as suppliers ought to be very much in favor of and supportive of animal welfare, that animals should not be mistreated while they're in the process of, quite frankly, being processed for food. Animal rights is another story. Animal rights says that you can't have a seeing eye dog. Animal rights says you can't have a fish in an aquarium. That you can't have a zoo. You can't have a rodeo. You can't do anything with animals, including eating them. And groups like the Humane Society are, again, masquerading as doing something about dogs and cat shelters. You know, they run commercials on TV and say, send in your $19 a month, and they give you the impression that they're connected to all these local pet shelters around the country, thousands of these pet shelters. In fact, they give less than 1% of their money to these pet shelters. They use most of the money, and it's about $150 million a year, to attack animal agriculture because they've got a vegetarian agenda, and they're constantly going after companies that are either supplying eggs, chicken, veal, pork, red meat. They're going after those companies all the time, trying to drive up their cost of production or trying to see to it that people feel less comfortable eating that product. Quite frankly, I don't think you can work with these groups because their agenda, their ultimate agenda, is not where you want to end up. And they're going to constantly move the goalposts. I mean, when they come in and they say, well, we want the chickens to be in bigger cages. Then they say we want chickens to be free range so that they're basically walking around a barnyard in the old McDonald's era, if you will, Farmer McDonald, that is. But then they come out and say, listen, you know, even if the chickens are allowed to walk around, if you're killing them for food, we're still against it. So there's no way to deal with these people because you can't buy into their ultimate agenda and they'll keep asking for more. I think that today an unethical operator is by far the exception to the rule. You know, restaurant operators ask me all the time. They've gotten a letter from one of these organizations, and the organization wants to open up a dialogue about their sourcing. They want to know whether or not they'll have a conversation. It may be PETA, it may be the Humane Society. They want to talk to these people about the restaurateur demanding that their sourcing treat the animals differently. And my answer to them as to what they should do is absolutely nothing, zero, nada, not a thing. Because even if you send a letter back saying, well, thanks for your inquiry, but we're not interested, you will then have opened the dialogue and you'll get another letter back. It may sound like you're not being very sociable when you just disregard the mail, but that's what I would do. Well, look, these are my thoughts based upon my experience and the experience of other people who have operated contrary to what I'm suggesting. They're not necessarily the positions that the Food Channel is taking, but I'm quite comfortable in making that recommendation. Do not deal with these people. You cannot deal with them on an honest basis. You want to know more about how the education system in this country is impacting on the industry? Join me for the next segment.